Alrighty, we are on to week 113 of World War II, October 24th, 1941. Martial law in Moscow, but is the cavalry coming? Martial law, is that really all that different from the already established form of government in the Soviet Union at this point in time in history? Is it really all that different? Like, what changes? What really changes? Like, no, actually, like a serious question there. I don't really know what changes. At least in terms of Russia. I kind of understand what changes, like, in democracies, but Stalin Russia is not a democracy. Kind of already martial law-ish in my eyes, but what do I know? Let's dive in.
You're gonna attack who? And who? And
Talking
who?
about Tojo?
Wait, all of those places?
He's talking about Tojo.
Yeah, but don't you think anybody's gonna try and stop you? Hey, but they're neutral. But no, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, he's
okay.
got to be talking about Tojo.
October 24th, 1941. They kill one of yours, you kill one of theirs. But if that doesn't make them stop, what do? They kill one, you kill 50? 100? How many will it take to stop the resistance?
War. Yay.
I'm Indy Nidell. This is World War II. Last week saw panic in Moscow as the Germans approached ever closer, even though rain, mud, and snow had begun to hobble all movement. Still, the Wehrmacht...
They seem to be moving pretty fast for hobbling. Faster than they have been.
closed two giant pockets, taking hundreds of thousands of Red Army troops prisoner. I also spent a few minutes talking about the recent political situation in Japan, which has resulted in Fumimaro Konoye resigning as prime minister. He is replaced on the 18th by Hideki Tojo, who is very much a war hawk. In fact,
no way.
Japan is on a course for soon making war in the South Pacific to secure much-needed resources. The only navy with really the power to prevent this is the neutral American one. On the 22nd are air defense exercises in Tokyo and a first practice blackout. Also, a Japanese recon plane flies from Indochina to the Malayan Peninsula. The pilot advises that the airfields at Kota Baru and Alor Star should be prime objectives for any invasion there. On the 18th, the Soviet spy Richard Sorge and many members of his spy ring are arrested in Tokyo. It is he who warned Joseph Stalin about the German invasion of the Soviet Union, which is still in full gear this week. I went into a bit of detail about the closing of the Vyazma pocket last week, but didn't say so much about the Bryansk pocket, which was also being closed with hundreds of thousands of Soviets about to become prisoners of war. The northernmost part was closed as last week ended. And this week on the 18th, Army Group Center Commander Fedor von Bock declares the southern part closed. What was left of the Bryansk front has delayed Heinz Guderian by 2 weeks now, though, allowing the Red Army to build and man new defenses. And they've also inflicted 4,000 casualties on Guderian's forces this month, bringing his total to 45,643 for the campaign, which greatly worries him, especially since, though he's been given a bunch of replacements, they don't have the experience and toughness of those who have gone before. As for the goal, Moscow. On the 18th, troops from Siberia arrive there. Troops will soon be arriving from all over the vast USSR. On the 19th, Moscow is placed under martial law in an official state of siege. Joseph Stalin says he will remain in the city, though most of the government has left. 500,000 men and women have now been mobilized to dig 5,000 miles of trenches and anti-tank ditches around Moscow. 185 miles of barbed wire is laid out. The Germans are just 100 kilometers from the capital. Günter von Kluge's 4th Army has been advancing towards the Soviets' Mozhaisk defense line for a few days along the Minsk, Warsaw, and Kiev highways. By now, west of Moscow, the Soviets have a merger of the Soviet Western Front and Moscow Reserve Front, and the 5th, 16th, 43rd, and 49th Armies defending the Mozhaisk, Volokolamsk, Maloyaroslavets, and Kaluga approaches. Fighting for those 4 towns continues all this week, though Kaluga has already fallen, even as the weather freezes, thaws, and then rains, creating pretty much the worst terrain for battle you can imagine.
Yeah, it sounds pretty
Mozhaisk and Maloyaroslavets fall the 18th, and the Germans are slowly but steadily advancing. Narofominsk falls the 21st. Further north, Kalinin, a pretty major strategic spot, fell to the Germans last week, but Nikolai Vatutin has been ordered to form a special operations group to take it back. This is 2 rifle divisions, 2 cavalry divisions, a tank brigade, and a motorcycle regiment. The fighting is heavy in this region all this week, though they don't succeed in taking it. This group is also now part of the Kalinin front under Ivan Konev. At the end of the week, Adolf Strauss's German 9th Army joins Reinhardt's 3rd Panzers at Kalinin so they can hopefully advance to Torzhok. But though the Germans do have the airfield at Kalinin and are flying in 30 to 50 cubic meters of fuel every day, an active panzer division uses as many as 220 cubic meters per day.
Damn.
Reinhardt's panzers are stopped for the moment at Kalinin. The Blitz tactics, which had so utterly shattered the Soviet front in early October when conditions were dry and the panzer forces more tightly concentrated, were now impossible. Hüppner's panzer group engaged in a grinding frontal push which quickly drained resources that Army Group Center's overstretched supply system could not replace. Furthermore, in abandoning much of their heavy equipment in order to keep the advance moving, German commanders were forsaking much of the firepower necessary to break the concrete bunkers and entrenched fortifications of the new Soviet lines. Still, the expectation is that Georgy Zhukov's little forces will be swept away, and Hüppner and Kluge will soon arrive in Moscow. Guderian's drive further south on Tula is to begin the 23rd. Gotthard Heinrici, one of his Army Corps commanders, writes to his family, the 23rd, that the trucks require 36 hours to travel 35 kilometers, and the roads are littered with dead horses and broken down vehicles.
No, not the
Guderian's
horses.
spearhead units complain on launch day that they cannot go forward because they don't have enough fuel, but Guderian orders them to move out anyhow. Just the day before, Army Commander Walter von Brauchitsch asks Bock's opinion about launching a drive towards Voronezh. The drive is actually Adolf Hitler's idea. Bock thinks it's a terrible idea since it's 285 kilometers southeast as the crow flies for the units that would have to do it. Bock is disregarded, and on the 24th comes the order for the southern forces of Army Group Center to reorganize to head for Voronezh. Hitler, as we have seen, has no issue disregarding his field commanders. He says already the night of the 21st, "A war leader is what I am against my own will. If I apply my mind to military problems, that's because, for the moment, I know that nobody would succeed better at this than I can." So, Guderian will continue towards Tula, but some of his forces will be sent towards Voronezh with Maximilian von Weich's Second Army by way of Kursk. But you know, there are other theaters of battle here. While German and Soviet attention was fixed on the Wehrmacht's dramatic drive on Moscow, operations of near equal significance were unfolding along the northwestern and southern strategic axes. Struggling to satisfy Hitler's strategic ambitions, Army Groups North and South recorded spectacular achievements in October. In the north, Zhukov had stopped Wilhelm von Lieb's advance on Leningrad with Army Group North a few weeks ago. Lieb's plans now are to even further isolate the city by circling it from the east with Rudolf Schmidt's 39th Motorized...
Oh my god, he looks like a fucking piece of shit. He just looks like a bad guy. I mean, like I've said this before, but he's one of those that really looks like an evil man.
Corps, Lieb's last one since the other panzers had gone south to head for Moscow. They're to head northeast and take Tikhvin and Volkov. Then they'll meet up with the Finns east of Lake Ladoga along the Svir River, and then just starve Leningrad into surrendering. Other units will go around Lake Ilmen from both north and south to even further cut the Moscow-Leningrad Railway and then join the northern part of Army Group Center. So, at the end of last week, Schmidt crossed the Volkhov River, broke apart the Soviet 52nd and 4th Armies, and this week on the 23rd, captures Malaya Vishera. In the south, Adolf von Kleist's 1st Panzer Army is resting at Taganrog for the time being. But Walter von Reichenau's 6th Army and the 17th Army, now under Hermann Hoth, have been advancing from around Poltava and Mirgorod. The Soviet armies that they are currently facing, well, smashing, are the 6th and 38th, who've been trying to reform after the disaster at Kiev. What with the encirclements at Bryansk and Vyazma and the defense of Moscow, Stavka has no reserves to throw in down here. So the Red Army forces are ordered to withdraw their forces to the northern Donets and Mias
Ah, so they're allowed to retreat.
rivers. This they are doing all week, even as Reichenau is fighting the 38th for Kharkov. Stavka has managed to form the 56th Army, though, under Fyodor Remezov to protect Rostov and block the Caucasus. On the 24th, Kharkov falls.
Yes.
Trinity Business School encourages entrepreneurs to study for the MBA course.
On the 18th, Erich von Manstein's 11th Army attacks the Crimea. The Crimean Peninsula is a major objective. It has the Black Sea's main naval base, Sevastopol, and the Kerch Peninsula at the eastern side is an entrance to the Caucasus. Manstein has been advancing, followed by the Romanian 3rd Army, and he faces Fyodor Kuznetsov 51st Independent Army, though Kuznetsov is sacked and Pavel Batov takes command. These are the troops who recently evacuated here from Odessa. They have 4 cavalry divisions and 12 rifle divisions, but the thing is, Kuznetsov was worried about an amphibious assault and deployed forces along the coast, not leaving sufficient defenses of the northern approaches. So Manstein sees pretty big success pretty quickly and advances throughout the week. And on the 23rd, the Soviet command is reorganized. Yep. Zhukov takes over the northern half of the whole front and Semyon Timoshenko the southern half. But it hasn't been just soldiers fighting in the current and former Soviet territory. On the 22nd, the Odessa massacre begins. It lasts for 2 days, resulting in the deaths of over 25,000 Jews. The massacre begins after a delayed bomb left behind by the Soviets when they pulled out of the city last week kills over 60 Romanian occupiers at their headquarters, including the commander. Jews are blamed for the sabotage.
Fucking course they are.
Thousands are hanged the first day, and then many thousands more are led from the city. Many are shot, and the others are burned alive or bombed in sealed buildings. There are other reprisal massacres this week. On the 20th, Karl Holtz, German commander in Nantes, is murdered. 50 hostages are ordered shot in retaliation. 48 meet their fate. Elsewhere, the Germans are roughly following their formula of 100 locals killed for every German soldier killed and 50 for every one wounded. This week also sees the Kraljevo and Kragujevac massacres. The first comes after partisans and Chetniks attack the German garrison at Kraljevo. 10 German soldiers are killed and 14 wounded. Some 1,750 people are executed in retaliation. The second massacre comes the 21st after 10 Germans are killed and 26 wounded in the region. 2,324 people, mainly Serbian men and boys, are killed in retaliation. Both of these have effects beyond the immediate, though. The Germans feel that mass executions of Serbs is counterproductive since it removes needed labor and drives the population to rebel. Draža Mihailović, leader of the Chetniks, thinks that further Chetnik attacks on the Germans will only result in needless deaths of more Serbs, so for now, he will scale back his group's guerrilla activities. I only cover these events briefly here because they're covered in much more depth in our War Against Humanity sub-series.
If I were to watch that series, I think I would be very, very depressed, more depressed than I regularly am.
Some are
I'm
also
not gonna watch
covered on
that.
our day-by-day
thank
Instagram
you.
coverage of the
No, thank
war.
you.
As for my weekly coverage of the war, this week is now at its end, with the Germans advancing on all 3 fronts, even against the elements, Japan preparing for war and busting a super spy, and brutal reprisals in occupied territory. Unlike much of the German high command, Joseph Goebbels is worried about the glowing reports that there will soon be an armistice when Moscow falls, just like there was after Paris. Goebbels observed such exaggerated expectations with growing trepidation, knowing that unless Soviet resistance soon collapsed, the German leadership's soaring public approval would. In this respect, it was not just the Soviets who stood to lose something in the fighting before Moscow. Germany had overplayed its hand in its public declarations by such a terrific extent that the prestige of the whole Nazi state, including its much vaunted Wehrmacht, was now exposed to a very public defeat. On the 19th, Italian Foreign Minister Count Ciano writes in his diary, "The approach of winter is viewed with great concern by all. Too many illusions have been built up, purposely or involuntarily, on the shortness of the conflict and a victory which was supposed to be easy." And the day before, he writes of the German drive on Moscow, "Isn't this a case of their having sung their hymn of victory too soon?" They've been singing such a hymn since June 22nd. It might be getting a little old. I mentioned the arrest.
And that was week 113 of World War II, October 24th, 1941. Martial law in Moscow, but is the cavalry coming? We did not really talk about the martial law in Moscow. That was kind of just mentioned at the beginning and then moved on. This was back to another week of where there really wasn't anything to talk about, but still a good, I mean, all of the episodes in this series are good. So, yeah, on to week 114.